Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you see that the situation in Ferguson, Missouri, is it seems to be escalating more than anything else right now. Just last night, there was a lot of chaos, tear gas being fired, rubber bullets, stuff like that. And one of the things that I was talking to my friend with, who's on the air, Dr. Chenelle Jones at Ohio Dominican University, she's a criminologist there, is we were asking. What is going to come out of this, right? We were doing an inventory. We were thinking about the Trayvon situation. We thought about Jena Six, and we said, there doesn't appear to be any tangible long-term outcomes that have come out of these protests, other than the fact that we've protested. We get to say we did it. So I want to dig deeper into this. So I reached out to Dr. Jones, who was gracious enough to lend me some of her valuable time to talk to me on the air. So I want to ask Dr. Jones, how are you doing today?
Always good, always good. I'm just a little disturbed. I was up watching some of the footage from Ferguson yesterday, and it's just very troubling and disheartening to see all of this. But other than that, I'm good. We started a brand new semester, so first topic, of course, was the situation in Ferguson. That's a great way to start off a semester. But yeah, everything is good.
Well, I can imagine with you being a criminologist, I mean, with you talking about crime and punishment and race and things like that all the time, that this is just heavy conversation ground in your classroom. And what are those conversations like? I mean, you teach mostly non-black students, right? I mean, how does that
Right.
go?
Mostly non-black students. They're mostly white American students. And the first class of the first semester yesterday was race and crime. So it presented an interesting dialogue. When I told my students, I said, who knows about the situation in Ferguson? A couple of them raised their hands, so they don't really know about what's going on. So, that was issue number one. But then the students who did know about the situation, I asked them the question. I said, why do you think people are protesting? And it was so amazing to hear some of their responses. One student said, because an unarmed guy was shot. And so then another student said, well, I heard he was shot because he was robbing a store. And then another student, and these are all white students, and then another student says, well, I think he was running away from the police officer. And another student says, well, I heard he was trying to steal the police officer's gun. So it's just amazing how you have all these college level students and they get their information solely from the media and what's being portrayed and not even knowing the totality of the situation. And they come up with these stories. So, of course, it took a little bit of deconstructing some of the information. And, ultimately, one of the things that I had to emphasize is we really don't know what happened. We have eyewitness accounts. We have contradicting eyewitness accounts. We don't know the forensic evidence from the police officer's vehicle. We know what's in the autopsy report, but we don't know the trajectory of those bullets. We don't know if I believe there was no gunpowder residue on his skin, so there must have been some distance. But then that statement, you can't really support it because they don't have the clothes to investigate. Hey, maybe the gunpowder residue was on the clothes. So it's just so much information that we don't know. So to go and formulate an opinion and say this is what happened definitively, we're not quite at that point. We all have our assumptions and our notions, and based upon what's put out there. And another issue that I brought up is that's part of the problem with Ferguson Police Department and how this investigation is going on. This is by far the worst investigation that I've ever witnessed and kept up on. I just think it's amazing because usually police departments, they give that information immediately, and it seems as though they're kind of trying to protect the officer at this point rather than just disseminate the facts, say this is what happened, and then justify. I mean, if it's a justifiable homicide, justify it. Put the facts out there and say this is why this officer shot. He was being charged by this young man. I don't know. But I don't know how you can justify 6 bullets. Still, there's just so many issues going on with that. But like I said, when I was talking this over with my students, a lot of them didn't know much about what was going on. And then the other thing that struck me is that they said that people were protesting because the police officer shot an unarmed man. And, that in a race and crime class, of course, we're going to bring up the issue of race. And, I had to break it down to them like, this is just the tip of the iceberg, or it's just, that needle that broke the camel's back. of a historical trajectory of officers and police brutality, militarization of police, but pretty much all of this targeting the African American communities and primarily African American males. So this one incident is the one incident, but what it does is it brings back memories and experiences and vicarious experiences of issues and incidents that people have had in the past. So I had to take a moment and sort of frame it holistically for my students, which was a little, it's kind of heavy on the first day. Usually on the first day, you just want to go over the syllabus.
Like, hi, how are you? Let me tell you where I grew up, that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly. Like, what's your favorite food, that sort of thing. And they got me talking about the whole Ferguson incident. So, that's where we are now. And now we just need to get to a point. The last thing that we also discussed is, where do we go from here? With this whole Ferguson situation involving Darren Wilson and Mike Brown, you have what we know, but there's also a lot of what we don't know and a whole lot more of what we need to know. And it is up to the police department to provide that information. I believe the public has a right to know what exactly went on. And not only that, once you have all that information, where do you go from here? Because as you've seen with the Jena Six, as you've seen with Trayvon Martin, people went out there, they held vigils, they protested, they marched, they decided to boycott, I think, Florida for a little bit with the Trayvon Martin incident. They did all this stuff. They lobbied. You had the Dream Defenders. Wonderful. All of that is wonderful. But at the end of the day, how we have the Mike Brown situation, lessons were not learned. And so the question is, are we going to move from the standing outside and protesting to really advocating policy change, petitioning that the officer, the police chief, step down, changing some of the laws that created this, demilitarizing the police departments? All of that needs to be the focus. And what do we do now, and where do we go from here? Because if we, what we've seen for this past week, and obviously the police tactics, they're not working, because we see this constant battle between the public and the police officers. Every night you turn on any news channel, you see tear gas flying through the air, you see these police dressed fully in their tactical gear, probably don't even know how to use half of it. They have their shields out, and and it's a bunch of them, and they're doing all of this in a I think part of it yesterday I saw was a residential neighborhood. I'm like, who does this? This is scenes that you typically would see in a war zone, not in a neighborhood, not in your basic American city. And so the whole approach is wrong, and we need to figure out, okay, where do we go from here? How do we move forward? And what lessons are going to be learned? Because I just read a study from the Pew Research Center. They just issued out a study. And they're, again, same with the Trayvon Martin, you have a racial divide between white Americans and black Americans in terms of how they perceive the incident, how serious they think the incident is, and whether or not they think the response from the police is warranted, as well as the public's response is warranted. And of course, as we saw with Trayvon, we know most African Americans think it's a racialized issue. They think the public's response and the riots and the protests are justified. Most white Americans think that it is not. And we need to move beyond this combative black-white issue and really begin to engage in some meaningful dialogue, because obviously the lived experiences of the African Americans, they're still not being translated to be fully understood by many white Americans. And until that happens, you're going to get the same responses and the same approaches, because they don't understand. I mean, I was even looking at the police chief, and he was very disconnected from the community that was the police chief over for their department, for the Ferguson Police Department. And not only that, it seemed as though, and this is going in a whole nother direction, but it seems as though even with Captain Ron Johnson, they put him out in the forefront. But when they put him out in the forefront, they also increased the police presence and their methods that they were using. So it's kind of like, okay, we're going to put this black guy in front, but at the same time, we're going to have more officers out here. We're going to have more tear gas out here. We're going to have this curfew. And so, it was kind of like we're going to try to divert you and trick you a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're going to increase our efforts over here.
And it's funny when you jump into talking about Ron Johnson, who, I think it was a great strategic move on the police's part to put him out there because people are eating him up. He spoke at the church next to Al Sharpton and gave the tearful speech about his baby, his son with the tattoos and the heads cocked to the side and the sagging pants. Yeah, and everybody, people just were cheering like it was church, like it was a basketball game, and it's funny because what they're tapping into is that black people tend to be moved by flash rather than substance, unfortunately. We're moved more by emotion. Not all of us, but some of us are moved more so by emotion than by actual logic. And because if you look at this logically and you look at this in terms of substance, what's really happening? We're going to give you a wonderful speech, but then we're going to drop tear gas on your ass, and we're going to shoot you with more rubber bullets. We're not going to change a single thing in terms of policy, but we're going to give you something that's going to make you feel good. And guess what? He's one of you. He is one of you, and the tear gas does not hurt as much when it's being shot by another black man. You see, that's the whole point, right? So, and I don't want to undermine what Captain Johnson's trying to do. Maybe he's a good guy, but it's not what kind of person you are. It's what kind of person you are in that situation. What kind of person you choose to be in terms of your action, not in terms of your words. And so I just wanted to jump in on that. But I'll let you continue.
No, I completely agree with you. And the first thing that I said when I saw Captain Johnson walking on the streets I don't know if you saw, there was a couple of images where he was actually walking on the streets with the protesters, talking to them. He did a couple of press conferences and he was taking their questions and responding to them. One of the things that I said when I first saw that, I said, this is community policing and this is what we need. Now, if you take that, we'll call it the Ron Johnson model. So if you take this model and you apply it and then implement substantive change, that is how policing should work. Police should not, they're there to protect and to serve. They should not be the one brutalizing the public. They should not be the one arresting reporters who are just trying to do their job. They should not be throwing tear gas bombs at people and rubber bullets. The purpose of policing, and I teach a policing course, and I've done a lot of research and work with police officers. This is why I'm not going to talk about them too much, because I know a lot of police officers who are good officers. But one of the things the quote-unquote good officers that they do is they're so well at their job because they communicate with the public that they serve, and they communicate with the people that they're working with. And even if there's an issue, most officers have not even discharged their weapon in the line of duty. And the reason why is because they know how to de-escalate situations by communicating with whomever they're dealing with at the time. And, if you take the communication skills of Ron Johnson, the listening skills of him, and then you apply that to say, we're going to sit down, we're going to have a dialogue, a discussion, and we're going to get some ideas from the community. We're going to implement some cultural sensitivity training. We're going to increase the number of in-service training hours that you have annually to make sure you know how to work well with the public. We're going to put together a community panel and understand the needs that they have and what they want, and then create a list of action items and put deadlines and timelines on those action items. So that way we can actually go about changing the way that this is for Ferguson, and it could be applied to many other police departments, but how we interact with the communities that we serve. When we get to that point, that is when we will actually start seeing better police-community relations, because these images that are being displayed on the news, on the media, these stories that we keep hearing about Ferguson, all they are doing is fueling negative perceptions of the police. It is a horrible PR conversation, a horrible public affairs, relations, whatever, for the police department. And so now what's going to happen is this is going to just fuel that whole issue of many African Americans having negative perceptions of the police. And the only way that you deal with that is if you implement more of a procedural justice model. So you explain why you do the things that you do and what are the reasonings behind it, and transparency. So you know, any information that you know or whatever you can release to the public, let them know. So that way they understand, oh, well, he shot this person because he was beating him unconscious or whatever, you know. But at least that we have a better picture. With Ferguson Police Department, they're giving bits and pieces of the information, and they're being very secretive. And then at the end of the day, usually around 5 or 6 o'clock at night, you know, they increase their presence on the streets, and then they're throwing smoke bombs and tear gas and all this stuff at people. And this is just not helping their image. So they just need to do away with that approach, because the last thing what I'm noticing is it's not effective. Because if it was effective, we wouldn't be here, you know, a week later still having the protesters out, and they're needing to increase, the police department needing to increase their approach and their use of force. I think at this point the police tactics aren't working. Obviously, the public is used to it, so they're saying, you know, you gonna increase your force, we're still gonna protest, we're still gonna march. So at some point, they need to sit down and begin having a dialogue and figure out how we're going to address this situation of unarmed black men being shot. Ferguson also has a issue of African American men being disproportionately stopped, disproportionately searched, and disproportionately arrested. So they have other issues within that department that need to be addressed as well. So they need to get to the bottom of that. And the only way that's going to happen is when the police department, the chief of police, either he steps down and somebody else comes in, or he changes his approach and really goes back and looks at some of their departmental policies and considers strongly, well, just revise them, not even consider, they need to be revised. So that's what I'm thinking.
Well, you know, I'll tell you that the tragedy of the Ferguson situation to me is that media tends to operate in these little vacuums where we focus on one thing at one time, and if a story becomes big enough and interesting enough, it literally blacks out every other story that's happening at that time. For example, you know, the Israelis are still blowing up little kids in Gaza, but no one's talking about that. You know, you still have the Ebola virus killing countless numbers of people, really threatening the existence of the entire planet. Because if this virus gets out of control, it could be a serious problem. It's happened before. We've had the Black Plague, we had the Spanish flu that killed, I forgot how many tens of millions of people died from that. And I think it was called the Spanish flu. Maybe it was called something else. But anyway, you know, and then on top of that, if you want to talk specifically about the killing of black men, there's a black man killed by police. At least the stat that has been shared. I have to find the source, but about once every 1.5 to 2 days. And so other
Every
black
28 hours.
there
Every
you
20.
go. Right. So you think about how many black men have died since we started talking about the Michael Brown situation. You think about how many situations exist throughout the world that we need to be talking about. I'm finding myself increasingly concerned about the idea of really getting so tunnel visioned on one person, one situation, one department that we don't at least salvage the situation for the big picture. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't fight for justice for Michael Brown. It doesn't mean that we don't deal with the Ferguson Police Department. It doesn't mean that we don't try to find out what happened here. But, you know, I'm getting these calls every single day from CNN where every day it's Michael Brown, Michael Brown, Michael Brown. And yesterday, I remember the last question Anderson Cooper asked, which was a good question, was he said, you know, he said every week it seems like we have a case like this. You know, literally, it's an industry now. Literally, you have people that are making their entire careers just talking about one case after another after another. And I don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to just, you know, do that one after the other after the other. The analogy I gave was I said, it's almost like having roaches in your kitchen. If you just wait for each roach to come out and you stomp on each one, and you don't dig to the root of the problem, you're going to be stomping roaches for the rest of your life. You've got a job now. Your job is professional roach stomper. Or you can actually get to the root of the problem, get the whole house, bombed, disinfected, exterminated, whatever you call it, and really dig to the root. And I think that when you look at these protests that we've had the Trayvon Martin, that was huge. God bless America. People activism is becoming cool again, especially that social media, Twitter activism, right? But a lot of people are actually doing more than they're actually showing up. Jena Six, that was another moment in history. But what do we have after those experiences? All we have is the moment. All we have is the memory. All we have are these people that can say, I went to Jena, or I marched for Trayvon. I got my picture on my Facebook page with my hoodie on. I went to Ferguson and I got tear gassed and I was shot by a rubber bullet, and that's my badge of honor. But what, in terms of actual long-term solutions, long-term policy, has actually come out of this? What came out of Trayvon? Please tell me. You're the expert. You're the criminologist. Tell me one single thing that has made the world a better place as a result of the Trayvon Martin protests. I'm
Well,
waiting.
I don't know if it made the world a better place, but they expanded stand your ground.
Wait, hold on, wait. That's not. That doesn't help us. Wait. Are you?
That's kind of like
You're being sarcastic.
yeah,
Okay. I got you. Okay, go ahead. Please continue.
Florida passed the expansion of stand your ground, so it includes the warning shot provisions. Well, it helps people like Marissa Alexander, but it also can be abused because now it's not like you can't just shoot at somebody. You can shoot at somebody, but you can also shoot up in the air and say, "Hey, I'm about to shoot you. I'll shoot you." And so when we talk about what has came out of it, I would say that is the only thing, and I wouldn't necessarily call that a good thing, the expansion of stand your ground laws. I just finished up a book chapter with a colleague, and it's actually on the Trayvon Martin case, and one of the things that we actually looked at was collective action, which is what we're seeing here, but the importance of collective action and how that really facilitates long-term change. And we particularly looked at collective action after the Trayvon Martin event. And I want to tell you, we searched high and low. And we looked at policy. We looked at legislation. We looked at pretty much everything you can possibly imagine. Academic journals, laws, legal statutes, this, that, and the other. And we could not, unfortunately, come up with any long-term positive policy change that has happened since the Trayvon Martin incident a couple years ago. And that was one of the main points of the argument is, we can have collective action. We can have people rally and protest. But what it's doing more so now is raising awareness to an issue. We need to get beyond the point of just raising awareness to actually changing that issue so that it doesn't happen again. Because if that does not happen, we will find ourselves in the same situation. We will find ourselves talking about another young African American man or woman, whomever, who was unarmed, who got shot by another police officer. If we really don't think about, changing your politicians, changing your legislation, and really changing the way some departments go about policing, because really that issue of the militarization of police is adding to this, it's fueling this issue. And so there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. But yeah, in terms of your question, what happened since Trayvon Martin, this is just according to my research, I haven't found anything.
Well, you know what? I think that's unfortunate, and but I'm so glad you revealed this to us because maybe it helps us set a higher benchmark for the next movement because it is going to happen. Give it 2 weeks. There'll be another big shooting or another situation that gains momentum, because that's the key. These situations are happening constantly. I get them in my inbox. People send me what they always say is they say the same thing. They say, "Have you seen this?" Question mark. That's when I know, there's a story out there that's local, and they want help in terms of making it national. And some of these situations are equally egregious to what happened in Ferguson. I would actually say more so. Like for example, the case of Rodney Mitchell down in Florida. He was a college student and he was killed by police. And Detective Ken Williams has been really pushing to get to increase awareness about it. But for some reason, it isn't catching on, and nobody knows and this guy hadn't done anything. He didn't even steal cigars, right? And so my point is that. It's almost getting to the point where we have to really do some self-reflection and say, what are we doing here? What is this all about? Why is it that we don't want to get to the point where it becomes a fad to be able to say, I went to Ferguson and I was tear gassed. You notice how the media loves to flaunt how they were tear gassed? Well, we were there and we were tear gassed. Or Don Lemon, when he was being pushed away by the cop, he's like, you see me, I'm being pushed away by the officer. Almost like it's a show. It's not a show. I mean, this is real life.
These are people's lives.
Exactly.
And to point out, how you were mentioning the young man in Florida, all of this is pretty much overshadowing the other situation that occurred in Beaver Creek. Guy is walking through Walmart, goes to the toy section, John Crawford, picks up a toy gun from the toy section. Somebody sees him carrying the gun that he picked up from the toy section of the store, calls the police. The police come and they shoot him. And not only that, the police department, they're not releasing the videotape or the footage of the incident so people will actually know what happened inside the store. So, I think that's a pretty serious issue because there could be some corruption or some, scenario that we're not made aware of, but we're only getting what the police is putting out there to the media. I think that's very important as well. But you really don't hear much about that because it's all being overshadowed by the protests, by the riots, by the tear gas, by this entire Mike Ferguson event. So, yeah, I completely agree with you.
Well, I agree with you as well, but you're the expert, so it's my job to agree with you, not your job to agree with me. I'm just a fan. So thank you for your time. I'm not going to take any more of it. I am so appreciative that you took the time to talk to me today. Everybody, this is Dr. Chenelle Jones. She's at Ohio Dominican University. She's right down the street from Michelle Alexander, and every bit is bad. So you got to go look her up. You got to go read her stuff. She has been so helpful. As a scholar, activist, extraordinary black woman when it comes to giving us the information we need so that we can keep our sons and daughters safe. And so, Dr. Jones, for that, I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
All right, and everybody, my name is Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I thank you for checking us out. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.